So Labour's policy is to put the railways back into public ownership, but how confident are you that they'll deliver on that?
Well, they keep saying it on the record, on various rostrums, and privately they say it. We're having a meeting with the Shadow Minister, Louise Haigh, this afternoon, and we'll be going through some of the detail. What has to be worked out is what is the detail behind the principle. So if you say it's in public ownership, but you end up with private contractors providing the services, that will be no good. We've also got to examine what the Tories will do in the period they've got left in government, whether they'll issue extended contracts to these private sector operators such as Avanti. They've just given them a 9-year contract. So the Labour Party needs to be stating publicly that they'll go further, that they will bring in laws and regulations that will strip these people of their contract. So I'm confident they'll do it. It's just what it is behind that principle of public ownership that they put forward. But we also need that in bus services and other services so that cities such as Liverpool and Manchester and Glasgow and wherever can run their own bus services through municipal ownership.
Labour say they cannot commit to building HS2's northern leg. What would RMT want an incoming Labour government to deliver on HS2?
Well, we want high-speed networks all over Britain. We want HS2 and HS3 if we need it, because that's an investment in the infrastructure of the country, and you can't get into penny pinching and say it costs too much. Now, I'm not surprised that they're cautious, because we don't know what these Tories are going to do. There's already talk about them selling off necessary land on the route. It was set out wrongly in the first place. It didn't connect to the HS1, which goes to France. That's what we needed. So there's been a lot of problems with it, but we've got to get it built. So I'm hoping that they'll look at it properly. They'll have to take a breath, because God knows what's wrong with that plan now, and they'll have to recommit to doing it. As far as I know, that is their commitment in principle, that they are committed to building HS2.
Yesterday, at a fringe event, Peter Mandelson warned against an incoming Labour government tilting too far towards trade unions. What do you think about his comment?
Well, I'm not surprised. I think Peter Mandelson is the ghost at this banquet. You know, he's behind a lot of what's going on, the purges of left-wing candidates, the purges of socialists from what is supposed to be a socialist party. Mandelson is behind that. So I think all Labour members and all Labour politicians should be looking to put restrictions on Mandelson's behaviour. He's not elected by anyone. He just gets himself a self-prescribed role, and Keir Starmer seems to be supporting that. He's not a friend of the working class. He's not a friend of socialism, and we've got to be careful about him. So I hopefully he'll have his responsibilities and his say curtailed.
Labour is clearly courting big business this conference. We've got Goldman Sachs, Amazon and KPMG sponsoring events. What do you think about Labour's willingness to cosy up to lobbyists?
Well, I understand what they're doing. I don't like it. What I'm worried about is that these people will water down the New Deal for workers. That's what they'll be trying to do. They're not spending quite a lot of money to be here for no reason. So they're already lobbying that the New Deal for workers is diluted. I also understand that to some extent they want to keep business on side or neutral, perhaps at best, because they can do them a lot of damage. So it doesn't surprise me. It's back to the Blair days, really, and it's part of the modern world. Lobbyists exist in all sorts of forms. So I'm not shocked by it. It's just another shrug of the shoulders and you carry on. You've got to fight for what you believe in the movement and in this political party. And they'll be doing their utmost to make sure that we don't get change in the country. But we need change.
Amidst the lobbying bonanza, do you think Labour is taking unions for granted? Or do you think Starmer views unions as a nuisance to his positioning of the party as pro-business?
Well, I think they do take us for granted to some extent. We're not affiliated, but we do support Labour candidates and we'll support Labour initiatives that we agree with. And unions have got to get to a position, as far as I'm concerned, that they're an independent voice in society and an independent voice for working people. So that's what many of us are now saying in the trade union movement, that we've got to stand on our own 2 feet. We'll support what Labour do if it is in tune with what we need and what we want, but we'll be critical, as you've seen from some General Secretaries, even this week and in the run-up to the conference. So we've got to be a little bit cynical. There's nothing wrong with that about professional politicians. It doesn't matter whether they're in England or Scotland or in local government or whatever. We've got to assert our needs and our rights, and that's what the trade union movement needs to do from now on. Most trade unions are not affiliated to the Labour Party. I think it's 11 that are affiliated out of 48 that are in the TUC. So it's a minority position, maybe not in terms of members that are affiliated, but certainly in organisations. And that may go further in the future, I don't know. There will be a firewall between the politicians and the unions going forward, I believe.
Alongside the dispute with train operating companies, the RMT has been at the forefront of organising against outsourcing. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about this campaign and why it's so important to the RMT.
Well, outsourcing, I think, is undermining working class communities. You see that in all our services, from the NHS to transport to private industry. Hardly anyone works for the company that's delivering the service, has got their name on the side of the van. And what it does is lower wages in the long term. It gets rid of terms and conditions, gets rid of pensions, gets rid of workers' rights. So it's been a real damaging facet of modern capitalism. And we've got to make sure that people are working on good contracts, that they're working usually directly for the service provider, and that they've got decent terms and conditions. And that's what they've got to do. They've said that they're going to go for the biggest wave of insourcing. And for instance, we've had very good discussions with Mayor Khan in London about bringing cleaning back into TfL, Transport for London, or London Underground. We've got to see if that comes to fruition before his election. And if he does that, he'll get a tick from RMT. If he doesn't do it, we'll be extremely disappointed. But if Labour don't do that nationally, I think they will have betrayed working class communities, because it's really damaging what we're doing. It's part of the gig economy. It's about job insecurity, precarious work, and we need to stabilise our working class communities with good pay and good conditions.
Lobbyists aren't only approaching the Labour Party, they've approached the TUC and unions. Could you talk a bit about the event last month held between outsourcing companies and trade unions at the TUC?
Well, we were represented at that meeting. It was a short meeting. We had representatives there, and we made our views clear along the lines that I've just said, that these outsourcing companies have got to be brought to book. And they're getting worried, so that's why they're there. I mean, there will always be room for contractors in the country. Some contractors are very genuine. They bid for work in construction and engineering in particular. And you might argue that anyone that provides a service is a contractor. So there is room for people that provide services, but it doesn't have to gnaw away at the major institutions of our state, really, such as the NHS, prisons, teaching, are all being outsourced. You know, most supply teachers are working for agencies where they could be working directly for the local authorities. So it's affecting every part. So they've got a good reason to be worried. I don't know what the outcome of that meeting will be, but we will make our views known to the TUC and to others that they should feel cautious about what's going to happen to them, because we need direct employment as the model going forward, and the TUC and Labour should be supporting that directly.
You've spoken about wanting the full fat package when it comes to the New Deal for working people. Could you talk a bit about what that would look like for you?
Well, we would like more new deals. You know, they say they're going to put that in the first 100 days. That gives them another more or less 5 years to get more workers' rights in. So it does mean rights from day one of employment. For us, a really important factor would be sectoral bargaining, so that we can bargain for whole tranches of the workforce. So we used to have that. You could bargain even for people working in agriculture. And we've seen how poor the wages and conditions are in sectors like that. But that would apply to construction, engineering, and all sorts of areas, and obviously transport. So sectoral bargaining going forward is the key to changing this country, we believe. So there are lots of different aspects to it, and we've got a fringe this afternoon where we're hearing from Justin Madders, who's going to be leading this project on behalf of Angela Rayner, and we'll support him if he gives us the full fat package. But it will be a completely different deal for workers if we get a good bill, and we've got to make sure that in the next 12 months or whatever it is before the election, that doesn't get watered down. So strong rights for workers, secure work, good wages, and job security. So that's what a full fat package would bring.
If we go back to 1997, you know, Spice Girls were on the radio, Beckham's on the TV. What did you think?
I still didn't have any hair then.
What did you think of Blair when he was, prior to the Blair government being elected?
Well, I was glad that the Tory government went. I mean, you've got to go back to basics. You either get a Tory government or a Labour government, and that's what's facing us at the next election. And that the major government had to go. Again, it was out of steam. It didn't have any legislation, and it was causing damage to the country with all the infighting in the Tory party. But like many people, I wasn't surprised that He wasn't a full-blooded socialist. He didn't address the housing crisis that we've had since that time. He didn't bring back public ownership to the railway and many other sectors, which he stood on a platform of a publicly owned, publicly accountable railway. He didn't deliver it. And of course, he took us into a disastrous war, the effects of which we're still feeling today, even with some of the crisis in the Middle East. So I think it was a disastrous period for Labour in many ways. But there were some things that were positive. The NHS got better funding, education got better funding. So a poor Labour government's better than a good Tory government, in my opinion. I hope we don't get a poor Labour government going forward. I want a good Labour government and a period that will be remembered for progress in the country. But Blair was a disappointment. I don't think he was ever a socialist. I don't think he was even a social democrat, if I'm honest with you. So yeah, that was a disappointing period.
Do you think that Tony Blair's ghost, alongside Mandelson's, is haunting the conference?
Oh, well, he doesn't need to haunt it personally. He's got Peter Mandelson to do that on his behalf. So, yeah, they're exerting their influence. But, let's be real. It's a conference. There should be a big umbrella, a big tent, a broad church, and all those cliches. I mean, they've got the right to be here. They're Labour Party members, and that's a strand in thought. The right of the Labour Party's got the right to exist, just as the middle and the left has. But it's disappointing that they're spending their time purging so many people. Individual members out in the constituencies are getting purged for no apparent reason, clicking on a Facebook like over something that's probably not even controversial from many people's point of view. And we'll see what happens in the next few weeks about the stuff that's happening in Gaza at the moment and in Israel, which is terrible. Everyone thinks that, but I'm sure that they'll be looking at people to see if they can purge some more at the moment. So they're here and they're not going away, so we have to put up with them, but we have to win the battle of ideas. You have to win the argument for progressive ideas, for socialism or whatever your agenda is, and that's part of it. I welcome the challenge of that. Maybe they should invite us to some of their panels, but I haven't been invited so far.